Welcome to the video. In this upload I'm going to be reviewing the Midland Compounds that are in my collection, and that will be comprising of the Hornby models and the Bachmann models. There will be some opportunities for comparison, but really I just want to go through the locomotives that I have in my collection, and you can make up your own minds about the various points of detail about these engines. I think that they're absolutely marvellous engines, and they're amongst my favourites, whether they're Hornby or the Bachmann. So starting with the first one in the lineup, we've got here the original Hornby compound as it came out around about 1980. It's a tender-driven model, like all of the Hornby ones, and this one is finished particularly in the Midland livery, as you can see by the coat of arms on the cab side and the number on the tender. Now, I've not done anything to this locomotive at all. It is exactly as it was produced by Hornby back in the day. If we move along to the next one that I have, this one is actually finished in the LMS livery, as obviously stated by LMS on the tender and the actual number on the cab side. Now, this actually was the very first Hornby compound that I got, so that makes it, I would say, almost 40 years old. It remains one of the best running locomotives that I've got, whether the motor is mounted in the tender or not. It's very smooth running, very quiet, and it appears to be a characteristic of these tender motors, which were wedded to the longer wheelbase chassis. The ones with the shorter tenders and shorter chassis tend to be somewhat noisier, and not quite as smooth running as this, but this is something which is quite exceptional, and I'm very proud to have it in my collection. Now, I have made a number of detailed additions to this locomotive. Obviously you can see the coal that's in the tender. The other thing which I'll point out is I've actually put a fall plate between the cab and the tender. So say what you like about the tender drive locomotives, one of the best things they ever did with them is that they closed the dreadful gap that's in all models of, practically all models of locomotives, where there's a huge gap between the tender because of the drawbar fitting. It extends the distance between the tender and the cab, which I loathe. But on these there is absolutely no problem of that, so that's a big advantage in terms of overall appearance. If we look at the front of the locomotive, well, the first thing I did was to take the huge, enormous tension lock coupling off, and apply a screw coupling, a dummy screw coupling. I took off the dreadful plastic buffers, replaced them with metals, repainted the buffer beam, and actually managed to apply some lining around, some yellow lining around that buffer beam. So already we've had some enhancement of the way this locomotive looks from the front. The other thing which is of significance is I removed the originally moulded chimney that was on this and replaced it with a more accurately profiled Midland Railway stroke LMS chimney. And as you can see, if I move back to the first locomotive in the lineup, you can see that there is a difference. Actually, Hornby didn't make a bad job of this. It's not bad, but I thought, well, we can do a bit better than that. So there it is. Also, if we have a look there, that's it. What I've done is the Ram's bottom safety valves, I've picked out a few little features on that so that it gives it a bit more prominence. And yeah, coal in the tender, and I've also applied metal buffers, which at the time I think I must have only had brass ones, but they'll do for the back of the tender. Okay, so that's the Hornby LMS compounds and Midland compound. Not a bad model. If we go straight to looking at the side of this, there's one more thing I will point out about them, is that they're not absolutely to scale. The wheelbase is too long for the compound, and that can be, when we look at the Bachmann ones, you can tell that the boiler and firebox have been extended in length ever so slightly to accommodate the size of the chassis. Now that was because Hornby used a standard chassis size so that they could accommodate other 440s which they introduced at the same time, which would have been the D49 LNER Gresley 440, the Churchwood County 440, and the Southern Railway Maunsell Schools class. So the same chassis was used for all 4 of these locomotives, hence the slight compromise in the actual size. But overall, it's not too bad. If I remember correctly, commentators would say the actual length of the wheelbase suited the school's locomotive slightly better than it did for the other 3. But anyway, there it is. If you're moving on to the next one here, this is the first Bachmann which compound I got, and this was a National Railway Museum special edition. I got this as a present, and this is over 10 years old now, well, I think you can see for yourselves that there's a massive uplift in improvement in detail and just how sharp this model looks. It is beautiful, it is stunning. I mean, if we look at the lining on it, how immaculately fine that's drawn. There's even the lining on the wheels, and that is absolutely fabulous. So just take that in at the moment. Yes, nicely done on the tender as well. The Midland compounds seem to be running with larger Dealey type tenders. When we look at the later compounds, we will see that they were coupled up to the shorter wheelbase Fowler version. I think they look much better with the more impressive with the Dealey tender. If you go back to the Hornby ones just here, it's not 100% accurate, but overall it's got that length and sizing which gives it a much more of a presence than the smaller tender. Just while we're here, if we look inside the cab of the Bachmann one, we can see that there's fabulous detail inside. I don't know if we can get that angled in at all, but take my word for it, it's three-dimensional, and this is quite something that makes the absolute finished product a fabulous, gives it a fabulous look. Yeah. So moving along, the next one in the lineup is the LMS version. So this has some detail differences compared to the Midland, the original Midland compound number 1000. What happened here was that the LMS standardised on this design for express passenger work when the LMS was formed in 1923. I think trials were conducted in, I think it was 1926, with other constituent parts of the LMS companies, London North Western and Lancashire and Yorkshire. locos were pitted against the compounds on the Settle and Carlisle, and it was agreed that the compounds came out top in terms of performance and also economy, general economy. Again, we have the similar sorts of attention to detail on this. The driving wheels are probably fractionally smaller because on the LMS engines they were 6'9". On the Midland Railway engines they were 7'1¼ inch. Don't know where the 1/4 inch came from, but there it is, it's there. On the top, if we look at the boiler mountings, we can see the typical Fowler squatish, well, it's not squat, but it's sort of like flattened at the top of the dome, and the shorter chimney, and what's known as Ross pop safety valves as opposed to the ram's bottom. Also, we can see that the tender is somewhat shorter. And that is a beautiful, fabulous looking locomotive. So moving along a bit more now to the next one, and we come to back to Hornby again. Hornby introduced this shortly after they brought out the maroon version a year or two later, and it was in a gloss finish, a gloss black. And again, if we look at the front, I've removed the large coupling, replaced the buffer heads with steel ones. I've got a vacuum brake pipe, and we've got a screw coupling and the lamps as well. Again, it looks the part. As with the Hornby Midland compound that we looked at before, I've replaced the chimney on this. Again, that is more sharply profiled and it is more accurately produced overall. So again, we've had a lift to the appearance of the locomotive. The other thing I did on this to bring it up, as it were, the lining was only applied to the splashers and the foot plating, and of course around the tender. What I've actually added to are the boiler bands, so that finishes that off there. Also, the numbering and the lettering on the tender was all in white. That didn't look right to me. It never was white. It was always cream. Lettering and numbering on the sides of British Railways locomotives was cream. So I've painted over that one and replaced the numbers. The numbers are the same as it was on the front of the locomotive, which I didn't need to touch. But I think that looks better, and I think that makes it stand out better. I think that improves it, gives it a lift again. Other little tiny details at the front. I'm jumping about a bit here, sorry about that. Not only got the number, I've put on the shed plate as well. That wasn't on the Hornby locomotive. So yes, this is a very good model, and I think it looks better for the slight improvements. Also, I did put the lining on the cylinders as well. So that's, and the vacuum pipe on the back of the tender. The red on the buffer beam is much more accurately presented. None of this wishy-washy off red that Hornby was continually produced on their models. This is buffer beam red, correctly shaded as it should be. We can notice there is a difference now when I move on to the next one, which is a beautiful Bachmann model of the LMS compound in British Railways livery. Now here's this gap that I was pointing out before, and I know there'll be loads of people say, oh well, you can actually make that closer if you want. Yeah, but it won't go around the bends. At least with the Hornby tender drive locomotives, they go around the corners. Oh well, that's all right if you don't have what people sometimes condescendingly refer to as train set curves or toy town curves, as I've heard some people comment. So absolutely no need to put any further detail on this. It speaks for itself. Beautiful model. So shorter wheelbase as well compared to the Hornby. So what I'll do now is I'll just wrap up with a very brief overview of why I think these locomotives are so important. Although all 240 of the 3-cylinder 440s are often referred to as Midland Compounds, only 45 were actually built by the Midland Railway. Of those, there were 2 distinct variants. The first 5 produced from 1901 to 1903, when S.W. Johnson was CME, or Locomotive Superintendent, and the remaining 40 that appeared between 1905 and 1909, with significant alterations made under Richard Dealey. By their grouping though, 1923, they were all fairly similar, the main differences being the type of front frames and the addition or lack of superheating. The remaining 195 engines were built by the LMS, the last 5 appeared at the beginning of the Stanier regime in 1932. The whole class was visually similar, the main differences being the 6'9" driving wheels of the LMS built locos as opposed to the 7'1" of the Midland locos. The multitude of chimney and dome variations notwithstanding, which were interchanged between both batches throughout their working lives. Whatever one's opinion of them, the compounds were important locomotives for several reasons. They were the largest class of 3-cylinder compounds in the world, the most successful class of British compounds engines built, the most numerous of 440s of one class ever built in Britain, and the largest LMS passenger engine class in terms of numbers. The story of a class that was developed and produced over 31 years and remained in service for nearly 60 years is a complex one. The Midland Compounds were potentially one of the great British designs, with a few simple alterations such as superheating, replacing short lap travel valves which constricted speed and power beyond a certain point, some improvements to drafting. They could have truly been first-rate engines, even when compared with much later types. As one driver noted, quote, "Compounds came very near to true greatness." And there I will end it. Thank you for watching.